Well, I asked, where's the beef? Let's call this for what this is. Oh my God! They are so hopelessly woke. How dare you? That is the intellectual capital of the left today. Give me a break. You are now watching the Daily Roundup.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Daily Roundup from Rebel News. Of course, I'm Sid Vizard with Rebel News. Adam Soos joining me, both Albertans on the team. And today we're looking at the opposition Conservatives. There's a lot to go around in the news today, but also I want to remind you that if we're going to be watching these live streams and promoting them, the best way for you to support us is to do that through Rumble. And Adam, maybe you want to join me now and tell me a little bit about Rumble and how's your day going?
Oh, it's going great. Yeah, Rumble is awesome. It's incredible. On election night, this is no longer one of our election issues, but I think over 200, I think it's closing on 210,000 people watched our live stream on Rumble. I believe the CEO of Rumble was even on board there. He chipped in with a Rumble rant. It is a platform that is all about free speech. So they're not pushing one agenda. They're just saying, listen, it's what YouTube used to be. It's a platform for you to share your ideas, not fear censorship. Obviously, they've got some limits on that, but they're not trying to push ideologies. They're trying to create an open and honest platform where people can create. So if you're joining us on YouTube, that's completely fine. But be one of the 200,000 or so who swapped over, are supporting a free speech outlet like Rumble. It's a wonderful platform. It works really good. I even find if you're trying to look back on one of our old videos, if you try and search it, even if I'm writing or linking back to an old story, I can't find it on YouTube. The search, it's definitely being sort of suppressed or shadow banned, whatever you want to call it. Rumble, you can always find it right away. So if there's a topic you're interested in, really strong search engine. So yeah, consider swapping over to Rumble. And I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right myself. Thank you very much. Well, and for today's news, we're going to be looking at the opposition Conservatives going on the attack recently. And there's also a lot of stuff going on in relation to carbon investments, energy investments. There was some talk earlier about some of the solar energy stuff. We're going to get to all of that today. Adam, is there anything in specific you wanted to highlight before we get into the stories?
Yeah, you know what? Let's talk a little bit. We can go into some of these stories. I did want to mention, though, on this Calgary front, for folks who are in the area, there's a really great event coming up, and it's from our friends over at Canadians for Truth. Sarah Palin will actually be in town, so that's pretty cool. It's going to be at the Grey Eagle Event Center. For folks who haven't been out to one of these fire and ice shows, it's Theo Fleury, so number 14 for the Flames, Olympian, Stanley Cup champion, a real icon, somebody I grew up sort of absolutely loving, and Jamie Salé. So they do this sort of, it's like almost like a talk show. They have this incredible conversation. They've had Tamara Leach, they've had some other guests, and it's really, they have conversations that you just would not see at a conventional event. So it's great. It's a good laugh. It's good for everybody, sort of all ages. An incredible event. Given that this one's at a casino, it may not be all ages. We'll double check though. But tickets available now. Canadiansfortruth.ca. That should be a great event. And if you do decide to show up, well, you're also going to get to meet a bunch of us because I'm going to be there covering this event. And then you're also going to have some of our other rebels on location checking it out because it's just a really great event.
Well, and I saw you at the last one with those two individuals and Tamara Leach. That was great reporting, and it looks like a lot of fun to be at those events. So I do highly recommend it. And
it's
Adam,
a bit of a flashback to the, like, if you were at all remotely around any of the Freedom Convoy stuff or in Coots, Milk River, Ottawa, whatever, you're going to see a lot of familiar faces. It's a bit of a flashback, so it's something else.
Well, our first story of the day, an opinion story, we can pull that up now, about the Alberta oil sands. And they won a large deal, a $4.4 billion endorsement from Texas energy giant ConocoPhillips. Adam, what do you make of this story? It must be good news.
Yeah, well, obviously this was in the works prior to Danielle Smith being elected. This would have been in the works. But I don't think the timing is a coincidence that it just happens to drop just after the election. So they were working on this. My suspicion is they probably would have had a way out if the NDP was elected. But it's interesting because ConocoPhillips left when the NDP was last elected. And now we've got this sort of firm re-election mandate for the UCP party. And like Danielle Smith said, Alberta is open for business. So this is all the sort of rhetoric from the NDP and from pundits and even from some of the old guard conservatives who were criticizing Danielle Smith about how, she's going to scare away business. Well, this is just the first of two massive deals. A couple days. She hasn't even formed her cabinet yet, but it's incredible the extent to which just a vote of confidence, knowing that the government is not hostile to business. It's incredible to see how quickly that can confirm and finalize some of these deals. What do you make of it?
Well, to say the least, and I certainly think that there's going to be a lot more stories that are coming out like this, and it might not be in the moment this story will come out, and it doesn't directly imply, the fact that the UCP won and that stabilized the economic situation these people, the investors, would be walking into for the next 4 years. I think that's a very important thing to note, but it's not going to be highlighted. And we see again, there's that deal for the oil sands. There's also another deal coming in, which is actually our next headline. Greek company to spearhead $1.7 billion solar energy project in Alberta. This is a CBC story. Now, Adam, I have conflicting feelings about this one. In one hand, there's this and the other investment, 4.4 plus 1.78 billion. That sounds pretty good for the province. But at the same time, how secure is this kind of investment, do you think? An investment into solar energy?
Yeah. Well, solar is getting to it's not there yet, but it's getting there. And eventually eventually it's getting to the point where maybe if the government isn't trying to tax you for the power you pull off, throwing a solar panel on your roof might be okay. It's kind of like a Tesla where it's like on the brink of affordable and starting to kind of make sense, but not quite, but it's getting there. But I think that this is yet another sort of testimony to Danielle Smith's open to business mentality, where she talked about, and I know for lots of people it was tough because I don't agree with her sort of feeding into the net zero rhetoric. But when she does talk about net zero, she talks about selling it. So she's talking about selling carbon offsets, selling carbon removal, bringing in renewable companies that count as a net. So she's never going to do this, I hope anyways, and based on what she said, she's not going to do this like the Trudeau Liberals do, where they punish people, they punish businesses, they tax you. What they're going to do is, yeah, sure, bring in investments. Let's negate some of that carbon impact, which frankly I don't believe in or care, the net zero rhetoric. But regardless, if you can make money off of it, if someone wants to buy it and you are producing energy, there's not much harm in it, I think. And listen, if Alberta were magically completely renewable in 50 years, and then we could sell our ethical oil overseas to places with human rights violations that have children working in mines, that, you know what I mean? It should never be about negating our natural resources. But I get people's apprehension, like solar panels. Yuck, that's not what we're all about. But listen, don't say no to 1.7 billion. Don't say no to 4.4 billion. And I think this goes a long way to negating critics of Danielle Smith, who might say, oh, well, all she cares about is oil. She's going to destroy the environment. It's like, well, I didn't see massive solar investments of $1.7 billion prior to Danielle Smith, really. And clearly, there's some solar farms, but generally they're government funded. This is a private company coming in and making a massive investment in solar farms. So even if you're an environmentalist on that front, obviously most of these people aren't impartial and they can't objectively be like, oh, Danielle Smith did a good thing. That's not on the radar for them. But it scores some points, and at least subconsciously these people have to start thinking like, oh, well, I guess this is a good thing.
Well, we're going to have a more in-depth conversation about renewable at a later date and the definition of that word. But in a sense, it is good to have a diverse set of assets. And, I kind of agree to some of your points there. And it is interesting, though, to see, especially with the changes that are happening in the energy industry right now, Alberta is probably going to be a focal point regardless of what we're investing in, simply because of the resources we have. So it is, I think, always good to capitalize on that. Then the one concern I guess I would propose is with the expansion of solar and wind energy farms, how much would that affect our urban and rural Albertans? That's the one question I would have to see moving forward. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I certainly agree. Back to another point, and then I'll sort of carry on. The NDP spent so much time talking about like diversifying, but what they meant was getting rid of oil and just doing these other things. So I think opening the opportunities to everything, well, that's great. But listen, the only sort of environmental options, it's nuclear. Like the amount of birds that die when you have wind turbines is astronomical. It makes Tillings ponds look like a bird swimming pond. It's you can just walk by the mills and there's birds. Apparently, it can also mess with migratory patterns. There's reports of people having migraines, and I mean, I don't know if these are bona fide, but I've heard repeated reports that migraines, increased cancer risks, things like that associated with these turbines. When you look at a solar farm, you're also talking about completely clear cutting an area and destroying that entire environment. So how environmental is that really? Listen, energy can't magically manifest. Our oil is very ethical. If you're going to dam an area off to make a hydro dam, people will be upset about that. Because of Chernobyl and some of the other nuclear accidents, people are apprehensive about going nuclear. That's probably, especially with Canada, we have so much space, one of the more feasible things. But it seems like no matter what the option is, they don't want to go there. And they ultimately just settle on what the politicians' friends have businesses in, which seems to be solar and wind. So, but yeah, I take the investment. This is going to be happening one way or another, and I think if it's not happening in Alberta, it'll happen somewhere else. And I don't view it as an innate evil, but it's not the solar panels aren't this perfect solution that environmentalists paint them out to be. So yeah, good. Thanks for touching on that.
No, well, and bringing me to my next story, before I touch on it, I just want to say, as long as we don't start investing in tidal energy, like they have in the East Coast. But our next story, a little closer to home, of course, personally as well, a lot of people have been affected by the wildfires. And we have a story, looting will be punished, warns First Nation chief after wildfire evacuation in Alberta hamlet. Adam, I mean, you've probably seen a lot more of this than I have, obviously. I'm more recent to Alberta. What do you make of the situation?
Well, I actually love the image people get out there of First Nations communities. I think they're actually far more conservative than folks would think. We've obviously had the opportunity to go out and we did the repair of the church job where we replaced the roof and did some work on a church to help that community. But it's incredible. I want to go back a little bit. When the city was canceling fireworks, which has been reverted, thanks Dan McLean. But when the city was planning to do that, I called a bunch of the First Nations communities around Calgary, and they were all having Canada Day fireworks shows. Now, it's incredible to see when you go down. I've had the opportunity through reporting and through some of this work we've done to spend a lot of time on some of the reservations around Calgary. And some of the signs they have about like respecting your elders and like saying no to drug culture, which is going to transition into something we're going to talk about later. But they're sort of espousing lots of values that conservatives probably would within society. Now, is it always enacted perfectly? No, but it's really good to see this sort of firm stance against and protecting of the community. When we were doing the work on the church, I remember sometimes I'd go to sort of check on something, make sure everything was underway, or like a roof supplies had delivered when they were fixing that roof. And it was incredible how fast like the Tsutina police would come, because everyone was burning churches across the country and there's a white guy hanging around the church. So the police would be there so quickly to protect and preserve their community. And I think this chief coming out saying basically you're going to be banished if you loot on our property while we're escaping these fires. That's the lowest of the low. People are escaping their homes, often forced to leave animals behind, suffering. It harkens back to the High River gun grabs during the floods, but to victimize people when they're in the worst possible situation, I love seeing a chief coming out and saying, you know what, you're out of here. We're not going to tolerate this in the slightest, protecting their communities, a strong sense of pride.
Well, and speaking of communities that often you hear about, there's the next story that we have about the 2S LGBTQ plus
strong sense of pride for sure.
Yeah, it's getting longer by the day, and this is by Janice Irwin. It's actually a video. I believe we can share that now. And I believe the quote is, "For many in Alberta's community, I'm not going to say it again. It doesn't feel like a very happy Pride Month. You're hurting, you're worried, but please know this: you're not alone. You matter. We see you. We love you." And we're here for you, and we don't ever stop fighting for you. Let's play that video.
Hi friends, happy Pride Month, and it is absolutely an honor to be here on Treaty 6 territory with one of our newest elected MLGs, future MLA for Edmonton West Henday, Brooks Arcan Paul.
Danse Nito Damtik, Testo Winiwak. Hello friends in the 2S LGBTQ plus community. Today we mark the kickoff of Pride Month, and I'm so fortunate to be joining our wonderful ML Gay. I'm your ML Gay elect, and we're really looking forward to making sure that representation happens in the legislature. We will hold the government to account, and we will remember that Pride has always been a protest. Every single community is going to be represented by our team, and we're going to make sure that we do the best for every single Albertan. Thank you so much to everyone for placing your trust in our team, for continuing to fight for every single Albertan, but especially the 2S LGBTQ+ community.
And we know that so many of you are hurting, so many of you have reached out to us, and we just need you to know we're here for you, we see you, you matter, and we love you. And so from Rachel, from Brooks, from our entire Alberta NDP team, happy Pride Month.
Yeah.
Adam, what do you got?
I was hoping, like, I get during a campaign, even you saw during the leadership race, you saw Schultz and Jean and Sonny and Smith like flinging mud at each other, and then like Danielle wins and everyone gets on with their lives, and then they get back to business. I was hoping, I'm the optimist, I know, and I should stop being so optimistic, but I was hoping once the election was over, sure, the election's over, but let's move on. And let's get going. It's not. There's still. We saw GOT Gondek, and I think we've got an article about that as well. We can pull it up, but not necessary. GOT Gondek saying, "Oh, congratulations," but like I've got some concerns about hate. Like Danielle Smith is a progressive politician. I'm very socially conservative, so I don't agree with her on a lot of that. The reason that I'm not entirely upset with her is because she's libertarian. So she wants people to be able to do what they want. So if you're gay, you can go be gay. If you're ultra-conservative, you can go be ultra-conservative. She wants people to be left alone. Government shouldn't be mandating every aspect of your life like this. Any suggestion, though, that Danielle Smith she's very on board with all this stuff. I remember at an Alberta Prosperity Project event, someone asked her about men, like trans women, men, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, competing in women's sports. And she was like not willing to say that she's against it, which to most people is a no in conservative movements. So she can be about as big a quote unquote ally as you can imagine, and they'll still just ramp up this rhetoric about how she is a villain. It's wild to see this because she is not at all. She wants to bring business in. If it's green business, that's fine. If it's oil business, that's fine. She wants to get people jobs, and she is an ally to the Pride movement in general. Now, maybe not the extreme outliers and the political activism and everything, but personally, I know she's very libertarian and very in favor of all that. So the constant attacks are ridiculous. And the other thing too, I mean, the whole ML Gay thing, whatever, it's fine. Janice, I disagree with her probably on everything. She is a very nice human being though, so I have no personal issues with her. But it's just so bizarre to have, like, I'm a journalist straight. I'm just a journalist. ML Gay is gender inclusive. It's sexuality inclusive. It's like this RuPaul sort of punny business. I think it's just silly. I think it's kind of embarrassing. I really don't care though. Like her people seem to like it, so good for them. But I don't know. What do you think of this whole ML Gay thing?
Well, I think it has roots in the hijacking of homosexuals and lesbians and people who were actually being punished in a time for simply who they were. Now it's been turned into this, you must be proud of everything. And there's all these horrible stories about children that are going into facilities and getting, basically mutilating themselves, or having adults convince them that they need to be mutilated in order to live a normal life. I mean, yeah, sure, there's, gay people, lesbians, bisexuals, there's those sort of people. But at the same time, that doesn't, that's not something that you can use as a veil for the mutilation of children. And a lot of people within those communities are saying, look, we're not here for the MAPS, minor attracted person stuff and things like that. There's a hard line that's being formed between the stuff that's, you could say a little too far, and the stuff that, 20, 30 years ago nobody would have considered or looked at or had any problem with.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm sure probably lots of folks out there. I don't know why I'm doing a plug, but I am. The film Nefarious is incredibly interesting. I saw it the other night, and it's interesting how directly it tackles this. And one of the lines that you almost paraphrased there is like this stuff, like 10 years, lots of this stuff, and they're referring to like euthanasia and a number of other things. But lots of this stuff would have landed you in jail 10 years ago. Now you're a bigot if you express any concern whatsoever on those fronts. It is also bizarre, I find, to have so much of your identity be exclusively tied up in your sexuality. I'm a straight person, but I don't think I've ever mentioned that on stream, nor do I have straight tagged next to my name on Twitter. The fact that they've like sexuality has become an entire identity, rather than you're a person who happens to have a sexuality. It's very like almost like childish and delayed adolescence, where when you're a kid, you like sort of identify with something and you go all out, and that's your whole identity, whether it be like sports or something else. But it's bizarre to see some people where it's like their sexuality is the entire crux of that. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I entirely agree. Like I identify as a journalist. That's because that's my job. That's what I like to do. That's what I want to put my focus on. I don't identify as a pansexual furry. That's not in the resume, because that's not going to get me anywhere in life, and that's not something I want to be either. I guess there's, as we know, there are people out there who would choose that path, but it's for society to have a mass of people, a generation of people, believe that they should be indoctrinating themselves into these sexual livelihoods. It's, I think, inhumane at the end of the day. But with that said, perhaps we should jump to an ad break.
Yeah, let's go. We've got an ad coming up now, I believe, about this incredible student journalism conference. Some of our incredible young talent has actually come from this. So if you know someone who's a young, aspiring journalist, this not only is an opportunity to learn a lot, but it often can transition into either an internship or being part of our team in the long term. I know everybody that I've heard from that goes to this event has an absolutely incredible time. And you get to like meet with some of our top talent. I think Sheila's going, Avi's going to be there, Dave's going. It's a lot. Andrew Lawton is going, so it's not just Rebel; it's a whole team. But I mean, if you're at all interested in this, it's a no-brainer to go out to this. So we can roll that ad now.
All right,
so you can see the list of names there. It's incredible. Often lots of people who are winning are like most popular journalists. Derek Philbrandt, Andrew Lawton, massive team going to be there. So I don't think you can get to better experience. And these almost all these people have experienced like sort of the extreme on the ground, whether it be at the trucker convoy or in or overseas attending protests, whatever it may be. Pretty incredible stuff. So if you know someone starting to think about a career, thinking about maybe doing journalism, well, this is definitely the opportunity, the place to learn something, get some hands-on experience, and maybe eventually work with us one of these days.
And next, I should say, we're jumping into a bit of a conservative lineup. Pierre Poilievre, I'm going to mispronounce his name. I have yet to get it, just right. Pierre Poilievre. But our first story from BC. Now, recently, you've probably heard about the guy who was trying to sell meth, heroin, cocaine on the streets. He had like a little booth, and they shut him down. Yeah. The cops shut him down. But now we have this one from Pierre. In 2012, BC overdose deaths were 270. 2022 and 2012 was 270 deaths, and 2022 was 2,272. So you could say that's a bit of a spike. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, it's and these people who advocate for this harm reduction nonsense, it doesn't work I've had the opportunity. The Alberta model is tackling this in the exact opposite direction. Mike Ellis, Nicholas Milliken, Danielle Smith gave that incredible event. I urge people, if they haven't seen that report, go check it out. But they are damning people to what Mike Ellis referred to as palliative addiction. Like they're giving 12-year-old kids drugs. And what they'll do is they'll say, oh, well, we've seen a reduction in like deaths and whether it be like hep being spread or overdoses or whatever. They've seen a reduction in the percentage of deaths. But what happens is you have way more people doing drugs. And when you look at these facts, over the course of 10 years, BC brought in this sort of harm reduction, safe drug site access stuff. We're talking about going from 270 to 2,272 deaths in 10 years. I absolutely think that this was one of the key issues for many people during the election. And I think it is absolutely monstrous. No one would, to someone they love, damn them to a life of perpetual drug use and suffering. And Liberals hate doing the hard thing, but sometimes you have to take people, remove them from an environment, even if at the time, and we talked to lots of people in that video where at the time they don't want it, but afterwards they're just overwhelmed with emotion, bawling because their lives were saved by initiatives that remove people from those environments. This is absolutely heartbreaking to see that many deaths, that things have gotten that much worse. And frankly, these progressive lovey-dovey people who pretend that they care about everything and they'll fly their rainbow flags and everything is wonderful. That's all superficial. It's a veneer, because ultimately what happens is businesses flee the provinces, and people are left in despair and they're struggling, and then they give them free drugs. This is something out of a dystopian novel. It's almost like a Jonathan Swift level modest proposal where we'll just give opiates to the masses and reduce them to nothing. It is devastating. It's not in line with the dignity of human persons, whatever your background may be. And we need to stop this maddening experiment. I, for one, am so happy to see Pierre Poilievre, as well as some other provinces, nominally Danielle Smith and the Conservatives here in Alberta, tackling this issue so head on. This isn't an election issue. This is a basic human decency issue. And all the talking points aside, and all this talk of fear of hate. Well, I can tell you that giving people free drugs has nothing to do with love, but what they're trying to do now, these opportunities to save people's lives, is incredible. I talked to Chief Roy Whitney at that event, and he said that he lost his son, I believe to suicide, but it was because of like a long, treacherous path of drugs and addiction and despair. And he, among many other people, have shared that if they had the opportunity to get an injunction and to stop this, rather than providing free drugs to kids, he could have saved his son's life. And so many people we talked to there, whether they were saved or it was too late and someone in their family lost their lives, the people who experience this firsthand can tell you that we need to move towards rehabilitation, not safe supply.
Well, and this is expanding. It's becoming a larger issue in Canada by the day. I know there was the situation where there were like crack pipes and stuff that were handed out at a school in BC, and as well, in Toronto too. Toronto now handing out branded crack and meth pipe kits with city's logo. I don't know how far you can get, and it is a shame in a sense because, well, certainly in more than one sense. But they're solving. The government is attempting to make the problem more easy to deal with for these people that are in these situations. They're not looking to solve the problem of people getting into these situations, I don't think. They just, at the end of the day, they're facilitating drug addiction. In a sense, drug addicts. They're facilitating these behaviors under that same banner as we heard before. It's okay. We're all different. We all need acceptance. Well, is that really the right road to take? And now I don't know if I would advocate for the government to, physically take anybody and put them into certain situations whatsoever. However, I do think that perhaps they could play a role in advocating and promoting friends and family of these individuals to show their support and their advocacy to help get their friends and families out of these tough situations. But it's a shame. It's happening across the country.
And so how this would work, there already are interventions like this, say for a mental health crisis. So it would be like a family member or a police officer or someone who's viewing someone who's basically imminently going to die, and then they would appeal through it's like a hastened judicial process in order to be able to intercede and help. So it's not just sort of random rounding people up and sticking them in camps to though the government would do that with the unvaccinated, it's an intention to get help for these people from their sort of support groups, their community groups. And the thing that goes hand in hand with this is the sort of rampant crime. We've seen, I forget the statistics exactly, but I think it was like something like someone who gets arrested for a violent crime has an average of like 11 prior arrests for violent crimes. So what you have is people, they're going to jail, they're getting released with like $50 cash bail or no cash bail, and then they're going to one of these free drug sites, getting drugs, freaking out on drugs and going and committing a violent crime, and it just perpetually cycles. Police who see these people over and over, especially if they're minors and they're throwing their lives away, for them to be able to intercede and provide some help and support. The people that I talked to firsthand who have turned their lives around, some of them are now helping with this recovery process. Well, they testify that at the time they were pushing back, but after the fact, they were so grateful for what happened. Another thing I wanted to touch on, and this is again another Pierre Poilievre comment. A 14-year-old is dead because Trudeau floods streets with dillies, a drug stronger than heroin. Trudeau gives dillies to addicts who sell them to children for $1. I'll end this madness, invest in treatment, and bring loved ones home drug-free. Now that's wild, and I couldn't even imagine that. But I know Mike Ellis, who was a beat cop, like he was a police officer as well. He saw firsthand that they could get their hands on supplies, and they could actually sell. I'm paraphrasing here, but they could sell the safe drugs to kids because they were quote unquote safer. So they'd actually be selling the safe drugs into school for more and then buying cheap, bad drugs themselves anyways. So all you see is a net increase in the amount of drugs that are out there. It is absolute madness. And it's human lives. That's the cost. This isn't like, don't get me wrong, we talk about economics, you're talking about people's livelihoods and everything, but every day we continue down this madness, you're talking about more and more deaths, and we're talking about increasing from the hundreds to the thousands. Imagine if this was implemented right across the board. Just think, they're handing out city of Toronto, was it, branded crack pipes? How insane is that?
No, it's really hard to kind of get to grasp with, in a sense, because it's like, what is happening here? Why would we hand them crack pipes? I mean, let alone the fact that, I mean, between crack and cocaine, I mean, crack, that's what you're gonna, as a city staple, you're gonna go with the lower tier option in a sense. But really, at the end of the day, what are they doing to go after the dealers? What are they doing to go after the people who are creating drugs like meth, like fentanyl, and are they doing anything? Is Trudeau doing anything to stop this from either coming into the country or from this being produced in the country?
I would love to see, so often, like I remember, I think it was one of the Fords, they owned, like the Ford family anyways, owned like the sticker company.
It's a Toronto staple at this point, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They were making the stickers for all the COVID warning stuff for all the trains. So they gave themselves a contract. I would love to see who's making all these crack pipes and how lucrative the contract is, because it always seems, and I mean, I'm just speculating now, but it always seems like some friend of a politician or someone connected through their little cottage industry meetings suddenly is like, yeah, I could do 1 million crack pipes for you. Let's make a deal. And then they make this sort of behind closed doors deals. But like, just a little bit more broadly speaking, and then we'll jump to an ad break here, though. And I asked Dan McLean this the other day on stream as well, but why do you think it is that this sort of progressive, prevailing, very often sort of WEF-oriented mindset just like hits cities? Like it's like, oh, we're going to ban fireworks. We're going to have crack pipes. We're going to do pride side. They all do the same thing. Is it monkey see, monkey do? Is a little bit more insidious than that. You can literally look at, if Toronto does something, Calgary and Vancouver will follow, Edmonton will follow. There just seems to be this, I don't know what it is. Are they having secret meetings and deciding these absurd things they're going to do?
It's hard to say. I think perhaps, it's a lot easier to lose sight of God when you're in a city because you're always surrounded by distractions. And you contrast that to, let's say someone who's living on a farm. Well, you have your daily routine, the sun, if you see it go across the sky, if you live in a city, you're probably not going to observe that sort of thing as well. And that goes for everything in their surroundings. Is they're more in tune with the world they actually live in, instead of perhaps somebody in a city who might be distracted every day by advertisements on the bus or people honking in traffic. Every single second, there's something to distract. But on the previous note, we were talking about some of the stuff that was being handed out in Toronto. I just want to say rest in peace to the greatest mayor we ever had in Toronto. And with that, perhaps we should go to an ad break.
Yeah, let's do that.
The media said that Canadian truckers were Russian agents controlled by Vladimir Putin. Justin Trudeau called them extremists.
The small fringe minority.
We are here out of love for our families, our communities.
And the government put the country under martial law to stop them. But what's the real story?
If you can't see the future in clear outline right now, you're not paying attention. But the truckers in Canada can.
And I want you to know that I am not afraid.
For the first time, the woman at the heart of the trucker convoy speaks out.
Hold the line.
Tamara Leach, passionate organizer, loving mother and grandmother, proud Métis and proud Albertan, and defiant political prisoner jailed for daring to criticize the government. Tamara Leach. Her new book, Hold the Line, My Story from the Heart of the Freedom Convoy, is the inside scoop of what really happened. You've heard from the media and the convoy's critics. Now hear the truth from the woman who inspired the world and made Justin Trudeau blink. Visit theconvoybook.com to order your copy now.
Definitely recommend getting that book. Adam, have you had a chance to read it yet?
I ordered it. It's on the way. It's but with the election, it was just like chaos, but it's on the way. I'm excited. I meant to order it like right away as soon as it came out, and then Alberta election stuff just hit. And it's crazy, but it's in the mail now. Yeah, incredible. And I did get the chance to go to the, as I mentioned, Canadians for Truth event where Tamara Leach was there when she was sort of talking about it originally. So I got to take a little bit of a peek through it, but I'm looking forward to reading it for sure. It's incredible. The thing about her is she's not an activist. She didn't want to do this. It's incredible. If you have, maybe if you're not too sure about Tamara Leach, if you don't know her story, I'm sure probably if you're watching, you've got a pretty good idea. But just to learn how she's so humble and modest and sweet, and whenever she sees somebody, her eyes well up with tears because she's just such a loving person. She was pushed into this role as sort of a hero of the Freedom Convoy. It's not one that she rushed into, but that's what heroes are, really. Someone who takes up the mantle at those difficult times, even a mantle you don't necessarily want, in order to stand up for something. So yeah, incredible. Pick up that book. It was a bestseller. It probably still is. Just to have that at the top of those lists, it sends a message about where Canadians stand on these issues. So.
Well, and it's better to have it and not want to read it than not being able to have it and want to read it, because, as you know, censorship of all kinds is coming for us. And in our next story, Pablo Rodriguez brings us a story about the fact that Facebook is still refusing to work with Canadians to show how deeply irresponsible and out of touch they are. Once again, this is a disappointing move from big tech, and Canadians will not be intimidated by these tactics. Adam, what tactics is he talking about here?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I'm sort of two minds on this, because I basically want companies to be free. I don't want them to be subject to the CRTC, because it can cause significant problems. You look at Netflix, Paramount, all these other providers, and this isn't Facebook specific now, but just generally speaking, and you get an entirely different sort of perspective. You get an entirely different perspective than what the rest of the world is seeing. So critical content information, you're getting a limited version of that. So I'm very much of two minds. But the federal government and the CRTC, so much of what they're doing, it suppresses and controls, and Justin Trudeau and the Liberals They want to be able to control what news gets to the top. Big tech, YouTube, other companies, Facebook, they're doing this already, controlling, stifling, limiting what we're seeing. But I feel like it's just going to get worse. I don't know what, and you can talk about Facebook specifically, but I think you can also talk about this in terms of all big tech.
Well, but just before I say something, I want to add that in that message we put on screen earlier, it says, I'm told Facebook is announcing tomorrow it will block all news for 5% of Canada starting Monday. When Facebook ran this play in Australia, it was a global intimidation playbook. So just that. And then also, there's Facebook and there's other websites and stuff like that, such as Twitter. Obviously, Elon Musk recently purchased Twitter. And has taken a stance advocating towards freedoms and such. And we saw yesterday the Daily Wire tried to publish the What is a Woman documentary produced by them and Matt Walsh in full on Twitter. And they had this weird banner on that tweet basically saying this reach was limited. And I actually saw that tweet yesterday. You couldn't retweet it, you couldn't comment, you couldn't like, and it said point blank that we are censoring this content. You still have the right to say it, but we have the right to tell you how, or not to tell you, but we have a right to show it to however many people we deem to show it to. It's just more of the language is evolving in the debate for freedom, but the stances are the same. They're still restricting freedom in that sense. Elon Musk was able to, I guess, modify that decision by today. So it is, I believe the label has now been removed. But regardless, these hurdles are still existent within these companies, and he might be running it. But clearly, it's not just him alone that's going to be operating and managing Twitter. It's the team. And is his team sound? Well, what is his replacement is a WEF, a former WEF member, or employed in the WEF. So it's I don't know what to make of it. I guess time will tell. Elon does seem to be saying the right things at the moment. So we'll see. Adam, do you hold much stock in Elon Musk?
He retweeted it and said you have to watch this, and then he was like, take note of that. So he definitely is a voice for rejecting the overt control and censorship and the government mandated orientation. He's a bit of a maverick, so I think the fact that he's willing to say no or take a stand, I get it. But you look at all these organizations, whether it be Target, whether it be Bud Light, whether it be Facebook, right across the board, the massive investment firms that are in this are all on board with this. They're willing to lose money to push these narratives, and at a certain point, I think the dollars speak louder than the principles for some of these people. Elon Musk seems to be right on that threshold. So it's almost like good Elon, bad Elon. But the fact that he was willing to retweet that and the person who was basically blocking that stuff was shown the door, that's promising. Listen, we had, I think, 90,000 viewers on our stream on YouTube and 210,000 on Rumble. People need to put their money where their mouth is. They need to put their actions towards that. And if there's an outlet that is more free, is more open, we'll support those things. Like, no one says Twitter gets a monopoly on this. No one says Facebook gets a monopoly on this. And if there is another outlet or another social media app that is not willing to play these games, is willing to be free, well, then so be it. Now, once the government starts interjecting and putting in laws, that makes that very difficult. But I'm sure that the legal teams at some of these major corporations can find a way to say, oh, no, they're just accessing our American site. It's not. But yeah, it's so clearly and obviously oriented towards controlling ideologies. Like, this is not about you. There's horrific content on Twitter that doesn't get censored. Sometimes there'll be overt adult content. When you're searching something utterly innocuous, it'll just pop up. That's not censored. I know before Elon Musk took over, there was a massive problem with child abuse material that they could rather easily remove, but they had opted not to. That's largely been addressed by now. But, or at least to some extent, they've tackled that problem. But so much of this is down to controlling alternative perspectives. And it is very dystopian. It's like some 1984, like, we're going to censor opinions that aren't the approved opinions. We're going to alienate, marginalize, and make it impossible to find sources. But yeah, we need outlets that are outlets, whether it be social media, whether it be apps, that just reject that narrative And then we need people to support those. It's very easy to turn on your TV election night and watch the CBC stream. It might be one more step to go to Rumble and hit cast towards your TV, but every one of those actions is a vote, so to speak. So if a platform is not willing to support free speech, don't support them.
Well, and on that note, we actually, I believe, have 2 videos that we can show now on this very topic. And censorship of all kinds, whether it be through social media powerhouses, I guess you call them, or government. I mean, we've seen Justin Trudeau and some of the bills he's passed recently. I mean, not only are they actively trying to silence people, they're actively trying to prevent journalistic entities such as ourselves from publishing content and putting things out there that matter, things that they don't want people to know. And that's the thing, is oftentimes, they'll say, it's censored because, X, Y, Z, such is the case for the Matt Walsh documentary on Twitter. They'll censor it because it's harmful or, transphobic or whatever. But at the same, on the other side of that coin is the fact that it's actually very helpful. It's actually enlightening for people who might be questioning or might be going through this reality where people are inundating them with the idea that they have to transition. So in the same side of the coin where they can say it's harmful, other people could say it's harmful not to show. So it's really a non-argument, but they'll play it anyways, and they'll call it, their way is right, your way is wrong. It's politics.
And how many people do you hear who they wish they would have heard the other side of the story? I'm all about informed consent, and what you have is a sort of paternalization where they just they treat people like adults who want to transition even like children. They conceal evidence from them. You see this in the abortion industry as well. They don't provide them with all the facts. They're not transparent. They're pushing towards something. It has nothing to do with freedom of choice. It has nothing to do with informed consent. It's a pushed agenda, and it's undeniable, really. And it's sad to see it prevailing. Now, again, as we saw, whether it be election night coverage, whatever it may be, people are starting to reject this. They're turning away from it. And like I said, people are paying with are speaking with their dollars. Target, Bud Light, all these companies losing millions, billions of dollars when they adopt these radical narratives. Let's, if you don't mind, jump to this clip, though. It's good to see the Conservatives sort of growing a pair and tackling some of these issues head on. I get sticking to business and trying to get things going, but it's gotten so extreme that we need Conservatives who are willing to actually stand up. So let's play the clip of Pierre talking about big tech and censorship.
Justin Trudeau's total incompetence and his attempt to censor the internet are now hurting our media outlets. Now he's created a situation where big tech might end up censoring the same way that he does. I don't believe that either big tech or big government should censor what people see and say online. Conservatives are the only party that will protect Canadians against government and big tech censorship and allow everyone to express themselves freely.
Yep. That is, I'm sure there was backlash and people were angry, but that is the most self-evident. That's not a contentious opinion. They're going to make it one, but that is not a contentious opinion. And don't get me wrong, obviously, like illegal content, the government censoring that, abuse material, whatever it may be, sure, wonderful. But that's not what this is about. Frankly, they'll allow that stuff to go through, and then they'll censor things that maybe provide a different perspective or an opinion. They'll brand it as hate speech. It's so prevalent and widespread. You know what? Let's jump right into this video. It isn't just us saying this either. There's a Toronto hip hop podcast, and they're just roasting Justin Trudeau. He's become a caricature. It's very much a facade, and he's just made politics silly. It affects provincial politics with them kicking people out. It's absurd. Let's listen.
What's your thoughts on Mr. Trudeau? You're a Trudeau fan or a non-Trudeau fan? And listen, it's not, if you are, it's no hate,
listen,
you know what I'm saying?
Listen, before you come with your spiel, okay, bud? All right, bud? I could care less about this place right now. You know what I'm saying? We don't have a leader. We have puppets. You are your own leader. Just, you have to follow some of the rules. Yeah, I will follow some of it, then to turn around and kick your butt. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a Trudeau fan because I never voted in my life, guys. And that's sad. I'm born here. And that is sad. So Trudeau is not doing his job to me because he ain't never made me feel like he in my household or he's made a difference in my household. So I can't have no opinion on if I'm thank you for legalizing some marijuana, but in my world, marijuana was already legal.
Yeah, that was the one thing that, I guess he got some points for, like nationally legalizing cannabis across the whole country.
Yeah.
But then, like, when the pandemic hit, fam, like a lot of the stuff that this guy like allowed and like
keeping up with.
Yeah, fam, he really, really turned people's stomach, fam.
And you know what? When he did the blackface in college,
yeah.
they've never let that go.
Twice.
The internet is a dangerous place. What else? Him being Castro's son. There's just a lot to him, bro.
Yeah.
And it's like.
He bought it in Bill C-11. He turned it into, he got it, well, it's the law now.
I don't want to say nothing where he wants to come now and shut us down, so I'm just watching what I say,
Yo, he was on Brandon Gomez's show, so, he's tapped in a little bit to the culture.
Well, you already know why.
What? Because he wants to get our votes. He needs the approval rating of all of us, fam.
I hear you, but.
You know what I'm saying? And listen, I know, gang, this is not like no hip hop. Listen, fam.
This is all hip hop. He wants to shut down hip hop.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the fact that Bill C-11 is a thing,
Yeah. Amen to all that. Respects Toronto. That's, good words all around. That entire spiel was great. And it's true because, how many years has Trudeau been in office now? And how much better is the country? It's not better. No. And, you talk about COVID, right? Trudeau's at a point now where he's pissing off, the Toronto hip hop scene and the Hutterites in the Bible Belt, right? Like they were actually, Hutterites aren't allowed to protest, right? And they were so dismayed with the situation that COVID brought that they were actually out there demonstrating during the freedom convoy and stuff. It's against the religion. That's how strongly Trudeau was messing up. So across the board, everybody's saying, look, I'm done with Trudeau. Enough scandals, enough not helping people, enough fake smiles, enough blackface. It's time for a new leader. And the fact of the matter is it's time for a leader, like that guy says, because Trudeau isn't a leader. And there was one, correction I would say in that commentary was the fact that Trudeau's trying to get all of our votes. No, he isn't. Trudeau's not trying to get all of our votes. Is that why he was criticizing the unvaccinated, basically calling them swine, right? He wants the votes that will maintain his position in power. Everybody else, sayonara. See you later. So, Adam, what's your take on that?
Yeah, the whole it goes back to what we talked about earlier. The whole inclusive left, it's not there. We've seen it firsthand. These people who are so lovey-dovey and tolerant, well, they don't allow us into events. They'll say, I know Rachel Notley said, oh, we if we would have won, we would have worked to include everybody. That's not what they do at all. They exclude. And it's good to see different communities starting to realize that. When you have, like you said, and you hit the nail on the head there, Hutterites in the Toronto hip-hop scene rallying, maybe we'll see a feature track or something. But when you see those communities rallying together in opposition, basically we're at the point now where you're looking at Eastern Canadians who will just always vote Trudeau no matter what happens, even if the dude was caught killing a puppy. That's who's still supporting Justin Trudeau. Let's go to one more ad break now, and then we've got a couple stories to hit up after that, and then we'll do some chats if we have any and go from there.
Living with spike protein in a post-pandemic world is something we all have to grapple with, whether you've had the virus, you've been vaccinated yourself, or if you're around those who were. The wellness company's Spike Support Formula is a daily supplement that can help you feel your best and then stay that way. Go to twccanada.health to get back to that pre-pandemic feeling with Spike Support. Use coupon code REBEL to save 10% off these doctor-formulated products, which are rooted in science, and for a limited time, your first month's membership is only 99 cents. That's twccanada.health, coupon code REBEL at checkout. It's time to put your wellness back in the driver's seat.
Adam, before we get to our next story, what do you make of that advertisement? I'm really curious.
It's really interesting. I've had the opportunity to speak to quite a few people, even whether it be naturopaths or people with sort of alternative perspectives. I myself had some sort of respiratory issues after that, and there was a long COVID treatment center, and they were doing all this like sort of heavy drug use stuff, and it was not helping at all. And I actually had the opportunity to go through like a naturopath and try. I'm not going to advise it because I'm not a doctor, but it was interesting. After nothing working, some of these alternative treatments. I've not tried this product specifically, so I can't speak to it. But I know people who have struggled, and then they try one of these sort of alternative treatments, and it really does make a difference for them. So I've seen it help. It's helped me personally. So yeah, some people will sort of brand this as sort of out there or whatever, but then when you talk to people and they try it firsthand, and it affects their life in a very positive way and changes it. And very often these are more natural options than what they would prescribe. Some people are taking inhaled steroids forever instead of taking a natural alternative. So it's great to see a company like this that is, again, strong medical background, evidence-based, but willing to tackle some of these issues when the colleges of physicians and so many of these government agencies would brand it as not real medicine. Well, the fact is it very often works, and they're not married to an ideology that's being pushed by the government. That is at times anti-scientific. They're able to look at what really works and support and help people, because people were adversely affected. And it's great to see that there's an option out there for people to get help.
No, to say the least. I don't think it's the government's job in any way, shape, or form to be telling citizens how they must treat themselves. And I think that's obviously been a point of contention over the last few years. So it is nice to see that there are alternatives, and there are people who are able to sustain alternatives to what the government is touting in the pharmaceutical front, especially considering some of the heavy players in the pharmaceutical industry. And speaking of that, in a sense, I should say, our next article, it's some Ottawa parents in Ottawa were dealing with some pride activities, or had a point of contest with regards to some pride activities. And I'll read the headline for you. Some Ottawa parents keep kids home from school due to pride activities, OCDSB says. And I think that's very interesting. And I know there have been cases, not necessarily in a school, but in a small town, or a couple of small towns, I think, in Ontario, where the municipal bodies had decided that they weren't going to wave or have the pride flags or any non-government flags waved on government property. So I don't know. Do you think something like that is called for in this situation?
Yeah, I know the York Catholic School Board voted against this, and Kathleen Wynne, former premier, was saying, "Oh, this is like callous and brutal and stuff." I tweeted and said, "Listen, you don't get to talk about my faith. It's so ignorant and bigoted. That is not what I believe. It's not what Catholics believe. If you want to believe it, it's fine. Not putting up a rainbow flag or a pride flag or whatever other type of flag they want, if it's not in line with my beliefs, is fine. If you try to force me to or pressure me to, you're a bigot." Because I have my Catholic faith. I don't say you cannot put a flag up on your property. If there's a camp or a school that prioritizes that and they want to do that, good for them. I don't think it should be on government buildings, obviously, because I don't demand that they fly a Vatican flag for my faith. So I think that it should just be government flags, not ideological flags. Now, if there's some places they have a flag where they'll do like cancer awareness things, and they've got a special flag for that. If they want to occasionally fly a flag on one of those poles, you know what? So be it. Good for them. But the idea of bigoting, of bigotedly pressuring a school, there's the tweet. You can see it for yourself. And saying you're like a monster if you don't bend the knee and bow and kowtow to all of this. Well, listen, those rights, the right to believe and have a faith and adhere to those values, they're long enshrined in our charter. This is Catholics, Christians, whatever it may be, adhering to and upholding their faith. The whole LGBTQ SA, whatever they want to call it, I know there's a 2 missing in there somewhere. They want to be so monolithic. And I don't care who you like or what your background is. I'll have a beer with you just the same. I'm not angry at anybody. But don't come and say I have to fly a flag on my house to support something that you believe in that I don't necessarily believe in. That's wrong, and that's not how society. That's not how society is agreeable. It's basically like the inversion of the Spanish Inquisition. Instead of being criticized and tortured and maligned for not being Christian enough, let's say, you're not espousing the exact values that your king or lord at any particular moment is espousing. Now it's if you don't adhere to the LGBTQ narrative, even some of the radical elements, even if you ask questions, even if you're concerned about child mutilation, well, any of those things, you're then subject to the LGBTQ Inquisition, and you're going to be targeted and attacked. For too long, Christians, Catholics, other groups, and it tends to be Christians and Catholics. You don't see them very often going off on folks of different faiths. It tends to be Christians who are targeted. But to see them standing up and saying, no, enough is enough, we're going to adhere to our principles, it's great. I hope it starts a trend. We've seen with some politicians, Pierre Poilievre, Scott Moe, Danielle Smith, and now some of these schools, even a bishop in the United States with the whole Our Ladies of Perpetual Depravity or whatever it was. There's like a drag outfit that mocks Catholic religious orders. The bishop is like, this is blasphemous. We have to take those strong stances and say, listen, you want respect, you have to give it out. You can't just demand it. You have to dish it out as well.
Well, Adam, maybe you can champion this. And I saw on Twitter recently, someone had made mention of this as well, where what is the original, I guess you call it the Abrahamic meaning behind the rainbow? And I think now there have been so many transitions to the new pride flag and the newer pride flag and the more inclusive pride flag that it is actually quite separated now from the original pride flag that was used. So maybe it's time to capitalize on that, get that old original pride flag, and just remind people about the original meaning of the rainbow.
Yeah, I know people have been sharing that, and it's a commitment after the flood that there would not be another flood again. It's really interesting when you actually do some research on the origins of the Pride logo. There's sort of the Rainbow Yellow Brick Road musical connection. That's often what is cited as the origin of that logo as part of the Pride community. Obviously, the array of colors, a diverse community, all that sort of stuff. But pretty early on, you can also see that some of the folks involved in that, they were referring to that intentionally. They were sort of trying to flip that and saying, listen, you said there's not going to be another flood, we can do whatever we want. So I've seen two sort of origin stories on that. I think there's probably an element of truth to a little bit of both of those. But there are people reclaiming the flag, reclaiming the rainbow rather. But it's so wild just to see an entire month allocated to this, a whole month with the rainbow absolutely everywhere. If you don't fly it, the corporate logos all switching over. It's wild to see. It is the biggest zeitgeist spirit of the age thing, and it's utterly without substance. All these organizations on their Chinese and Saudi websites don't do it. They just do it where it's trendy and popular and where the people won't sort of push back or reject it. So yeah, it's something else. Something else? Did you want to get to our last two?
Yeah, I'll just jump to the next one. I just wanted to say it is kind of funny in a sense that, around the world, if you were to lay someone's flag on the ground and step on it, that would be considered, a provocation. You would be stepping on it against the person whose flag that was. And here we paint our roads and sidewalks with the pride flag, and we walk all over it. So it's kind of ironic, maybe they're trying to take a stance toward pride and, advocacy in that front, whereas at the same time, they're also desecrating their own movement. So it's kind of the cycle you would expect.
On that note, it's wild. We've seen dozens of churches vandalized and burnt down, and no one seems to care. And then you see a burnout. Someone does a burnout on a crosswalk, and it's national news. And Justin Trudeau basically visits. It's wild. The standards. It's like the old ask who you can't criticize if you want to know who's truly in control. Well, who are we not allowed to criticize? Yeah, it's wild. Let's get to these two last video clips, and then we'll call it. I know we're a bit over time here, folks. So yeah, we can run that Dr. Leslyn Lewis video.
And just as we're pulling it up, it's on the carbon tax.
It's the Liberals planning another carbon tax hike. Now, this brings the carbon tax up to 61 cents a liter on fuel, even though we've not seen a reduction in temperature and there's been no sort of positive emissions reduction from the first one. Well, this time it's going to be different. Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, many families, especially those who live in rural communities, have to drive out of necessity. They drive to school, to work, to medical appointments, to social activities. Families are already struggling with higher cost of living expenses. Now this Liberal government wants to add 2 more carbon taxes on financially stressed Canadians. The Liberal carbon tax 1 will add 41 cents a litre on gas. How painful does life have to get before this Prime Minister will finally cancel the carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Conservatives never want to talk about the costs of climate change. The Parliamentary Budget Officer reported that there was a $20 billion impact to the Canadian economy in 2021, Mr. Speaker. 600 fires are burning from coast to coast to coast, Mr. Speaker. They're devastating our communities. They're threatening lives and livelihoods. When are the Conservatives going to get serious about climate change and stop the denial, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you about the cost of this carbon tax. It costs lower income Canadians the most. It is an unfair tax. Carbon tax 2 comes at a time when many Canadians are struggling just to feed themselves. Now, every time a Canadian fills up their car, they will be paying an additional tax on the GST and the HST. This Prime Minister is literally putting a carbon tax on a tax. When will this Prime Minister take his boot off the neck of Canadians and finally cancel carbon tax 1 and 2?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Conservatives have no credibility when it comes to affordability, Mr. Speaker. Every time we put an affordability measure on the table, dental, rental, the Canada Child Benefit, what do? They vote against it. And the climate rebate, Mr. Speaker, is an affordability measure. It's going to help families be better off. But you know what's not going to leave families better off, Mr. Speaker? It's investing in cryptocurrency, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition hasn't walked back his comments. He hasn't apologized, Mr. Speaker, and that's because he has no plan for the environment, no plan for the economy, and certainly no plan for affordability.
I think if you actually believe that, that not doing a carbon tax does not help the environment in any way, shape, or form. It's a wealth redistribution scheme where the government ends up pocketing more money and they give it to their friends. It does not help the environment. It's literally insane tinfoil nonsense. And I don't know how that guy says it with a straight face. He cannot believe it, that it costs $20 billion a year, and it would if we weren't implementing this carbon tax. Furthermore, it is insane to blame a sort of chartable temperature increase, like not chartable, for the fires that happen and have been happening in summers forever. It's wild to see that you're picking a time where there happens to be a little bit more fires than usual to score political points. I just think that's so repugnant. And people are suffering, people are struggling. This is the opposite of leadership, and it's dead on there, the boot on the neck. They really don't care about your average Joes. They don't care about people. They just care about pushing their narratives. Help the environment, do good things for the environment. A carbon tax doesn't do it at all, period.
Yeah, but Adam, if you disagree with me, we're going to lose $50 billion.
Yeah,
how could you disagree with that? You're wrong.
Yeah.
That's what he said. That's all he said at the end of the day. Yeah. And you talk about the wildfires. There's actual plant life and trees that need the heat of wildfires in order to seed, to produce their ancestral, lineage in the plant sense. If you have zero wildfires whatsoever, then you're going to have certain trees and certain plants that go extinct. And not only that, but control burns are actually a large, a very common practice. And that, in Banff, we saw one incident where there was some kind of, a gender-focused training session where they had a bunch of, diversity protocols, and that wildfire in Banff was started because they were trying to do control fires. But control fires are generally a common practice every year that has to be done to mitigate the effects of larger wildfires or wildfires that are going to hit certain areas. And to say, wildfire bad, hail bad, right? There's going to be a hurricane. Every single day the weather changes. And every single day, so long as it changes, they're going to say that the change is bad. And it's a cycle for them that they can just feed off of forever, because when it's too hot, they can, say it's global warming. When it's too cold, they can say it's global warming. I mean, maybe they have to, do those 20 years apart so people don't catch on too quick. But at the end of the day, they just keep rinsing and recycling the same arguments.
10 years to save 20 years, 2030, 2055. It's been like that since the 80s. It was George Washington Sr. George Washington Sr. prompted this whole global warming terminology, and they've just been cycling it as a key election thing. And it's because for most people, so much of this is just superficial language. Yes, help the environment. The money helps the environment. People are like, good. I'm willing to help the environment. The critical thought is no longer there. So we do our best to elucidate people. I really quickly do want to touch on, and this is just another symptom of the entitlement. Trudeau and the Liberal government do not work for the people. It's clear the people do not want more taxes, but they just insist on it. They're all ideologically driven. And then this next story, and it's Andrew Scheer, this video. Justin Trudeau's hand-picked rapporteur says that he works for the government, not Parliament, and not for Canadians. Well, sorry to break it to you, and I know this isn't the case under Justin Trudeau, but the government is supposed to work for the people. And when you're hired by the government to investigate something, you, by extension, are working for the people. Let's jump to this clip of Andrew Scheer.
Mr. Speaker, in response to yesterday's vote where MPs representing a clear majority of Canadians voted for him to step aside, Rapporteur David Johnston said he isn't going anywhere. In fact, he said he doesn't work for Parliament or Canadians. He said he works for the government. That's the problem, Mr. Speaker. He works for the same Liberal government that benefited from Beijing's election interference, and he personally serves the Prime Minister who chose to do nothing while Chinese Canadians were bullied into voting for his Liberal Party. Nobody is fooled by this sham of a process. So when will the Prime Minister fire his ski buddy and call a public inquiry?
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
I'm reminded once again that it's not only unfair but deeply offensive to listen to the member opposite question Mr. Johnson's allegiance to this country. His 50-year career in public service has made it crystal clear to everyone that his loyalty is to Canada. And Mr. Speaker, as I also said, and as I quote former Prime Minister Harper, Mr. Johnson represents hard work, dedication, public service, and humility. Mr. Speaker, Canada is blessed to have a man so dedicated to public service, persevering through this heavy abuse.
Member for Regina Capel.
Canada is cursed by a Prime Minister who tarnished that man's reputation by involving him in this scandal. The Prime Minister can't be the one to decide how to investigate this scandal because he benefited from it. And David Johnston can't decide either because he's a family friend and a longtime member of the Trudeau Foundation. And Frank Iacobucci can't be the one to sign off on David Johnston's role because he's part of the Trudeau Foundation as well. Conflict of interest, conflict of interest, conflict of interest. Why is it that whenever the best interests of Canadians conflict with the political interests of the Prime Minister always chooses himself?
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
Mr. Speaker, protecting Canada from nefarious hostile activities of foreign state actors like China is a priority for our government. We have taken significant action to protect the integrity of Canadian institutions and in particular our democracy. We recognize that there is more work to do and we all have a responsibility to stand up and protect our democracy. I would invite all members to cease their attacks on some of the finest Canadians I know and to unite in this important work.
No criticism of Trudeau. Yeah, I am hopeful because you see conservatives are starting to actually be like, this is ridiculous. For the longest time, conservatives were trying not to lose elections. We see a little bit of that throughout campaigns, obviously, because the media is so hostile and attacky. But the strongest moments for Andrew Scheer, for Pierre Poilievre, for Danielle Smith, for Scott Moe, when Scott Moe had that line about, like, if this is what you're going to do, lock me up, like, come lock me up. Conservatives who are brash and willing to push back and willing to speak their heart and not just play politics, not just be on the back pedal perpetually, it's incredible to see. And it's that's going to win people's hearts over, I hope. The willingness to speak from the heart, to be blunt, to be direct, and to call out the absurd status of politics within this country right now.
Yeah, well, and again, I would recommend anybody to listen through to those question and answer periods. It really is laughable, especially when you get Trudeau in there. And we saw, yesterday there was the clip with Pierre questioning Trudeau's previous time as a teacher, and it is really at the end of the day a laughing house, regardless of what side of the aisle we're looking at. Yes, the Conservatives right now, they're taking a very strong stance, but they're taking a strong stance as the opposition to the government in a sense. Right now, Trudeau's in power, the Liberals are in power, and how many years now do we have of dirt that's been coming up under the rug and being created by this government? There's so much ammunition at this point that if they weren't asking tough questions every single day, I'd be very disappointed. And we're kind of at that point now where we need somebody. It's, time's come for somebody to go every single day of Justin Trudeau's time in office and note every single thing he's done. It's time, because Trudeau's not going to be the next prime minister of this country. That's not going to happen. I think that's a very tough sell for anybody, considering whether it be the situation happening now with regards to China's interference, whether it be his handling of the coronavirus, whether it be his seizing or attempts to reduce the amount of firearms, legally obtained firearms that are on the market, or whether it's him trying to give drugs to children and trying to mutilate them at the same time. I mean, his time is over. He's pissed off enough people at this point. So now's the time. We need a real banger of a documentary. Just hit every single point that Justin Trudeau's faulted on and let everybody know, because people have forgotten.
Yeah, and I like your optimism. I hope that's the case, but I don't know, man. It's at the point where I think the guy could kill a puppy on video. I've said it before, but I think he might be able to do that and still get elected. It's wild to see. The next federal election will certainly be interesting. We're a bit over time here. I want to thank everyone for their patience, for sticking with us. Any final thoughts, Sid?
Well, let's place bets and see who wins.
Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in.
Today, many journalists are really just advocates for woke ideology. They don't report the facts, and they simply don't care about our fundamental freedoms. Well, we're doing something about that.
What happens when the journalists themselves are really bought and paid for by the government? Can they possibly criticize the government freely?
The law in a rule-based society is the need for independent news.
Without pushback, you get away with it all the time. And I think that is the key, is to push back and call them out of the box.
Everyone kind of wants to be a YouTuber or a media star these days, or whatever. And people always ask me, well, how do you do it? What do you do? What's the secret? All that stuff.
No matter what type of journalism you're doing, whether you're doing the advocacy journalism that Robbie does, whether you're doing the investigative reporting that Sheila does, some of the gonzo journalism that David Menzies does, or whether you're working in fiction like CBC, no matter what, you are telling a story.
It was great. I think it's very informative. I learned a lot of stuff. I took so many notes, so it's definitely good to be here.
I'm really appreciating the diversity of the speakers. They all contribute really specific details on what to do as an aspiring journalist.
It's been absolutely mind-blowing from start to finish. Firstly, beautiful hall. We've been stuffed. It's like Thanksgiving dinner every night, so that's amazing. And the only thing that beats that are the people around us, the company, some amazing and unique individuals.
The journalism conference has been great. I met many prominent figures in this field and I got great advice.
It was a really good conference, very good to meet all the lovely people here.